This is Heart-repreneur Radio, maximizing your personal and business results by leading with your heart. With your host, Terri Levine. Listen every week as Terri tackles the topics that will help you become a successful heart-centered entrepreneur. Be sure to read the blog posts at www.heartrepreneur.com/blog. Come back often and add this show to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe in iTunes. You can also follow Terri on Twitter at MentorTerri and on Facebook.com/Heart-repreneur Terri Levine. And now here's Terri.
Hello and welcome to Heart-repreneur Radio and TV show with Terri Levine. I'm your co-host, Velma Gallant, and I'm excited to be here today. Please go to Facebook and check out Heart-repreneurs with Terri Levine. It is a fantastic community, and you will be able to connect with other like-minded, heart-based business owners like myself, Terri Levine, and our special guest today. So, we also want you to like our shows, hit that subscribe button, and we always love those 5-star reviews. And be sure to comment and let us know what it is that you're getting from today's show. Our quote today: there are 3 things that you must do in order to become wealthy. You must have the right mindset, discover your purpose in life, and find a business that expresses that purpose. Andy Fuel. Andy, I hope you said your name right. Today's show topic: how to break through your money blocks so that you can charge what you're worth. And our special guest this week is Dr. Amanda Barrientez. You know, I asked her how to pronounce it and I still said it wrong. Dr. Amanda is an NFA, no effing around, business consultant who helps coaches and online entrepreneurs work less, make more, and have more fun using her NFA Money Maker Methods. Less money stress and more money flow guaranteed. After going from food stamps to building a 6-figure business fast, she's been on a quest to teach business owners how to transform their relationships to money so that they can make easier money doing what they love. And you can start with Dr. Amanda's Money Blocks profile. So welcome to the show, Dr. Amanda.
Hey, Velma. So happy to be here today. Thanks for having me on.
I'm excited to have you here. I know I've had the privilege of participating in one of your programs, and I found a lot of value in it. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I created from your program is still on my wall.
That's awesome. A declaration, right? Yeah.
It was a declaration.
Yeah.
So what... You know, I'm going to ask a question a lot of people are going to be asking just from from your biography that I shared is, how did you pull off going from food stamps? Especially if I remember correctly, you were actually a parent at the time that you were doing this. Is that correct? Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. 3 babies. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it was a long journey. And just this last week, I was writing out my, why do I care about people making money? And it really goes back to what you're talking about. It was I had an epiphany moment when I was laying on the floor crying one night. So here I am, I have 3 kids. I was in grad school. So I was working my way through a PhD program. And, this was my way of going, I've got to get stable in my money. It was actually why I went back to school in the first place. And then in the middle of that, I left my 15-year marriage having an affair. And then my next relationship wasn't working out. I really struggled in relationships. And then my ex-husband lost his job. So there's no child support. I have 3 kids. I am moving out of this house, and I lived in a really expensive area in Boulder, Colorado. And I was like applying for subsidized housing. I didn't know where I was going to live. I was on the floor crying, and I was like, crap, what is the common denominator here? Like, I've got to figure this out. And I realized it was me. And I was like, okay, I'm the center of the failed relationships. I'm the center of these money problems. I got to do something about it. And so I really decided in that moment, like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I don't care what it is. And it wasn't that thing of like, oh, you say that, and then all of a sudden you know what to do. It was, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And then like, I'm not sure what that means, but I'm going to just take steps in a direction. And so for me, it started with podcasts. So I started listening to podcasts every chance I got because, as a single mom with 3 kids, and teaching classes, getting my PhD, I was busy. And so everywhere we went, driving them to school, or when I was walking to class or riding my bike in between classes or washing the dishes, I was listening to podcasts. And the common denominator among the podcasts was that they were coaches. And I was like, this is interesting. I've never really thought about coaching as a possibility. And how the universe, I think, always works in kind of magical ways. At the same time as this was happening for me, and I was starting to learn a lot, and I was starting to teach my students from a very different perspective, more of that coaching perspective, things started shifting and my world started changing and people started asking questions. And I thought, what if I became a coach? And simultaneously, my department was having like really huge fallout in our department, and everyone was stressed. People were leaving. And I was like, I don't want to be a professor. This looks really stressful and not, I'm not going to be able to make the impact I want to make. I'm going to have to move. I'm not going to be able to make the money I need to make to pay off even my student loans. And so I decided, I went to this amazing workshop, and at the end of it, the next day I LLC'd, and I was like, I'm going for it. I'm going to create a coaching business. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going for it. And so when I graduated, I just had saved up just enough money for 2 months of living money, which for me at the time was not a lot of money. And I said, if I can't get some clients by then, I'll just figure something else out. And I hit the ground running as hard as I could. And I went out there and networked. And in my first year, I ended up going 6 figures. And so it was a process of high drive. I would say now, looking back, a lot of fear. It was like fear-based motivation, where I was like, I got to get some money coming in. And then I just went to every networking event I possibly could and started talking to everybody I could and promoted myself like crazy. And I got just enough clients and it started to grow. And it was a huge learning curve, so much fun, tons of fear. And, here I am today. I'm 2.5 years in now and loving my business. And my main mantra now is work less, make more, have fun. And it's that process of going, I'm shifting out of fear and uncertainty and doubt. And every year it's just gotten easier and easier as I teach what I've learned to the people that I work with to help them. Because what I saw was this common denominator of people, entrepreneurs, being really scared about money. And so I started doing polls, and they would say, I spend up to 75% of my day worried about money. And I thought, I don't want that for you, because I know how it feels to be scared about money and feel stuck.
So there was a lot of juiciness in there. One of the first things that I heard when you were sharing was, I'm the center of. And I think it's really important to point out that I did not hear any judgment when you said that. All I heard was responsibility. Is that kind of what your experience was, or was there some judgment at that time?
Velma, that's such a great question. And I think what happened for me in that moment is that I finally stopped blaming other people. Up until that point, I really blamed pretty much everyone else for my reality. I was like, it's my ex-husband's fault. It's my parents' fault. It's society's fault. It's that I was born brown and poor and all these things, I just blamed everyone else for everything. And finally, I just went, and it's really the NFA style approach, is radical responsibility. And when you blame other people, you lose your power to change. And so I had that moment. I was like, no one's going to come save me here. And I've got to do this myself. And here's my opportunity to really start to change. And so it all came together just really powerfully, to where I just went, I got to stop this victim. I had a really bad victim mindset before that. And so you're right. It was definitely this moment of, okay, I can't blame other people anymore. I've got to shift my mindset. I've got to do everything I can to start owning responsibility, and at least seeing what is possible from that place, because no one's coming to save me.
Well, it's really interesting looking at like the we can always bird's eye view things, right? So we go up like the eagle, and we look at the path that we're on, and sometimes it could feel like we're going like this, and sometimes we want to be going like this, but it ends up being this lovely curve. And what I've heard was, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm at the center of all this. And then it was that inspired action of listening to podcasts when I've got free time. And then from that, it kind of weaved into, the teaching and coaching together. And that weaved into, and so it's really interesting seeing the path that led you to where you are now. And the other thing that you talked about was fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I think sometimes those inspired actions kind of ease the fear. What would you say about that?
Yes, absolutely. I think that people, when they get stuck in a state of fear, they tend to freeze often. So it could be fight, flight, freeze. So the fight could look like overworking instead of stopping to strategize a little bit, or it could be that you freeze and you don't want to take any action, so you procrastinate. For me, the fear really got me motivated. It was like, oh, I got to push as hard as I can to have this work. And some of it was the fear of I didn't want to go get a regular job. It's like, the only job that I was marketable for at the time was to be a professor. And it's quite a big ordeal to get a job as a professor. And I didn't really want the job as a professor. So I was like, oh man, I got to have this fly. So that fear motivated me in a direction. The fear of not being able to pay your bills is a pretty scary fear. And I had been there for so long that I was so used to it that it was okay. And I just dove really deep into learning everything I could about fear and imposter syndrome and shiny object syndrome and, inner critic beat up. And how does that even operate in our brain? And what can I do there? Because I used to have a lot of social anxiety. So I wouldn't, in a social setting, I'd be very scared to speak up and I would force myself to do it. But it wasn't my strength, let's say. And so I started digging into confidence training a lot. And so it was really all of those mindset training pieces where I went, I'm scared. What am I going to do about it? I'm uncertain. What am I going to do about it? I want to have confidence. Like I see these, for me, it was modeling after a lot of coaches where I was like, I want to be that person on stage. I want to have my own podcast. I want to be interviewed on podcasts. I was like, I want all those things. So what's the stuck point between where I am and where they are is me being confident enough to do that. And so I really dove into a lot of the podcasts I listened to and books I read were about confidence, fear, inner critic, that kind of thing. And imposter syndrome, and it worked well. It was just like light bulbs going off all the time of like, oh, that's what's been holding me back this whole time.
Interesting. That's really interesting. And I love what you said there as you were moving through this. Name it. What am I going to do about it? Yeah. So it was, I am here. Where do I want to go?
Yes. Big time. And take action. So you asked the question, was it, fear that, or how did you get, it was action that eliminated the fear. And it is true. Action does eliminate fear. When you sit stuck in it just grows. And we sometimes think that we're not, we often think that we are combating it by avoiding it. And we go like, you just avoid, but it's this unconscious block, right? And what you avoid persists and grows in size. And so if you avoid it, you can't actually bring it to your conscious awareness to then transform it. And I love the word transmute. It's like you're transmuting it into something else by calling it out and going like, I'm scared. Now, what am I going to do about it? I'm this. What am I going to do about it? Like no one, I think it's Mel Robbins that I think it was a long time ago when I started, I was listening to her talk about like, no one's coming to save me in the morning. You got to get up in the morning and go like, what am I going to create with my life? And I really got into that place, was like, okay, I was married for 15 years and it didn't, there were a lot of things there. I'm like, well, is this the kind of relationship I want to create? What kind of relationship do I want to create next? What do I want to be dependent financially on a man in my future? What am I going to do if I don't want to be? And just started questioning all of those things a ton. And I then it helped me face my money blocks, because I realized like, wow, I have a lot of money blocks, especially about women in power and women being money makers. And so I've started to dig into that work as well. And all of it really is grounded in fear. In my mind, a lot of it's grounded in fear and overcoming your fears.
That made a lot of sense. So what I heard was that you did a lot of learning, which makes sense, because if you don't have the data, go get the data. Right. And what you were talking about, avoiding things, the picture that came up in my mind is I have this bag of garbage. I'm going to go shove it in the closet.
Yes.
But eventually it starts to smell and it leaks its way into everything. So it's true. Like, okay, my garbage stinks. What am I going to do about it?
Yes.
So asking a lot of those questions. So when you know what, this is before we get into this next question, I'm going to pause for our little commercial break, because I think this is the best place, because the next question is probably going to trigger a long conversation again. So when we get back, Dr. Amanda, I'd love for you to be able to share how our listeners can best get a hold of you.
Hey there, it's Terri Levine. I just wanted to pop in for just a moment as you're listening here to Heart-repreneur Radio and watching Heart-repreneur TV. We have so many new and exciting things going on. So you can watch a free masterclass. Highly recommend to get a conveyor belt of qualified prospects. That's at TL, like Terri Levine, tlwebinar.com. Head over there. Enjoy it. Keep listening and sharing the show.
So welcome back to Heart-repreneur Radio and TV show. I'm your co-host, Velma Gallant, and we are here today with Dr. Amanda, and we're talking about money, online entrepreneurs, coaches, working less, making more, and having more fun using her NFA Money Maker Methods. And we were talking about the analogy that I used was shoving the garbage into the closet and pretending it's not there. Because that's often, like, when we think about our fears, that's the garbage of our life. That is the real stinky stuff that we try to avoid. And, leaving it in the closet for it to ferment does not do us any good. So you call your program, your system NFA, no effing around. Like, I can't say that word. And it's like, I'm not going to screw around with this fear anymore. What am I going to do about it? And so how do you support your clients? How do you help them to transmute that fear? And what do you turn it into?
It's going to sound really simple. Sometimes it's just naming it. Most people don't name their fear. So they let it's almost like, I love the analogy of the garbage. It's like they put the garbage in there without naming that the garbage is in there. And then they pretend they have this smell, and they're like pretending that they don't know the garbage is even there. They forget somehow, like, oh, I put the garbage in the closet and now it smells. Instead, they go like, why does it smell in my house so bad? And so they start cleaning the kitchen, and they start cleaning these other areas instead of going straight to the root and going like, what is that? Let's get rid of the garbage. And most people let fear take over every part of their lives and every part of their business and every part of their money. So in money, let's talk about money and charging what you're worth and money blocks. You go, oh my God, like I pretend that I want to build a business and I take action in a direction, but then I don't ever name the reason why I'm stuck. So then instead of naming that I'm scared I'm not good enough, or I'm scared that people won't like what I'm doing, or I'm scared that my dream is BS, or I'm scared that when I put myself out there, I'll look foolish, or I'm scared that the people at work are gonna laugh at me when they find out I have a business. Instead of naming all that, they avoid it and it grows, and then they focus on something else. And then they completely get stuck in this unconscious way of just going like, if they just went to the fear and said like, I'm going to sit in the fear of people laughing at me. What if people laugh at you? What's the worst thing that's going to happen if someone laughs at you in your business? But we amplify it into this huge thing, and it runs the entire show for years sometimes. And so it's often very simple as just naming it. So I always tell people, like, sit down and journal and write down, what am I afraid of? Like, get to the core of it. So when working with people, it's obviously easier to have somebody help you with unconscious fears, because if you were conscious of it, you'd shift it faster. But it's often just going like, what am I afraid of? Like, ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And dig in. And why am I afraid of that? And going 7 layers deep, or, however many layers deep, until you get to a moment where you're like, oh my God, that's what it is. And so often it's people will go, oh, I'm afraid my course won't sell. Okay, well, why does that scare you? I'm afraid that my business, I won't make enough money. Well, why are you afraid of that? Oh, then I won't be able to feed my kids. Why are you afraid of that? Well, then people will think I'm a bad mom. And then you start to feel your heart well up, like, oh my God, I don't want to be a bad mom. And that's what's really you're scared of. It's not that you're afraid the course won't sell. It's that you're afraid people will judge you as being a bad mom. And you can feel like, when I say that, I go like, ooh, that shifts. Like, you feel tears well up in your eyes, and you're like, oh, wow. And then once you say that, you can actually start to work with it instead of pretending it's not there.
I've heard the phrase, name it to shame it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's I want to emphasize, it's not shaming yourself, it's shaming the fear. It's like, are you serious?
Yeah. And I would say, like, it's like name it, claim it, transform it.
I
you
like
have
that.
no power to transform something that you're not aware of.
It's true. It's very true. So really what I heard there was a great question to start with, is what am I afraid of? And then it's, what am I making that mean effectively? I mean, you go through the process. What am I afraid of? And what am I making it mean? And then digging down to the really juicy parts at the bottom. And I really get what you're saying about naming it and claiming it, because that, again, is kind of like what we were talking about in the beginning. You know, I'm the center of what's going on in my life. So basically you were claiming everything that was going on in your life, taking ownership of it. And then from there, you can make a decision. It's kind of like that mapping. If in order to go from here to there, you need to know where here is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I think something's really important for viewers and listeners to know is that you can never have fear and gratitude live in the same space. You can never have fear and inspiration live in the same space. Fear and love can't be in the same space. So for me, you know, working with people on Zone of Genius and helping them do what they love, when you're really enjoying and doing what you love, fear minimizes. When you're stuck in a state of fear, your inspiration minimizes. So you want to really claim that so that you can get more into that state of inspiration, because that's your greatest magnetism force, where you can actually attract people your way much more easily. And then you also, if you're in a state of fear about charging what you're worth, which is an easy way to build your business faster, when you charge more for and value yourself, you're not in so much fear, because you're in a state of inspiration. You're going like, I'm inspired about what I do. I want people to see how awesome it is that they can change and feel like I do. And then you promote yourself without fear, and everything just gets easier. So fear is like that stuck point that really causes a lot of inner critic beat up, and it induces shame. And shame is the opposite of inspiration. Shame is where you're beating yourself up. You're feeling like you're not good enough. Inspiration is this thing like, I want to shine my light in the world, and I'm taking action because it's fun and magnetic, and I want to make impact. And you don't think in the same way when you get into that state. But if you're in a state of fear and stuckness, so it's like when I was saying, I've done polls, and entrepreneurs say that they spend up to 75% of their day in a state of fear about money. You're going to be limiting your potential in your business big time. And people can energetically feel it, whether you're willing to admit it or not.
You know, and there's so much truth in that. I know when I closed my first business, it was the business was creating fear. I had a circumstance where there was something not quite right in my marriage. There was something not quite right in my business. And Christmas Eve, they collided. I had been doing web design at the time, and my client's websites got infected, and it's Christmas Eve. So it's like, no matter what, I lose, right? Yeah. If I go help my clients, then I'm ignoring my family. If I'm spending time with my family, then I'm ignoring my clients. And it was like, okay, this isn't working. What am I going to do about it? And I actually chose to close my business completely and go back into corporate Canada. and that was an inspired action, because it was like, okay, I don't want either of these things, and these things aren't working together. So what do I want? And I wanted peace. I wanted my weekends. I wanted a little bit more financial stability and everything like that. And it turned out that, because much like you, my marriage ended at 15 years for very similar reasons. And at that time, by making that inspired action and the position that I ended up attracting, and I say that very deliberately, made it possible so that I could leave my marriage safely. That I could raise my son, and I could do the things that were the most important to me. And so that was, okay, I named what wasn't working. And then it was, what am I going to do about it? So, questioning and then answering. on my own to be able to guide myself to the right direction. So to me, there's a lot of sense in the work that you're doing with people in supporting them to name what's not working and then move from there into the inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. And it's admirable when people can pull that off on their own, and I think the reason we do it when we're at a really critical moment is because we're so tired of being stuck at that point that we're like, this is just not working. I've got to do something else. Whereas a lot of people, will live in a state of, it's like, I call it like the curse of comfort zone, because you can live in comfort zone your whole life and not ever lead that life where you feel like really super inspired and things are really great. You might just feel like things are fine. Things are pretty good. And no one wants to live a pretty good life. We want to live a kick-ass, awesome, amazing, fabulous life, right? And so it's interesting to think about the curse of the comfort zone. And in part, when big, big things happen, I think it's the universe helping us out to face it differently, because it's finally so big that we can't avoid it anymore. It'd be like the trash in the closet, the door bursts open and it falls out of the closet. You finally have to face it. It's like, oh, that's what's been going on the whole time. So in some ways, those downfalls are huge gifts. And as you do this work, it gets easier to not have those. Like, I don't now shift my reality or create my reality based on emergency mode, fixing big, huge problems that I've been avoiding, which is what I used to do. So I love to help people go, I'm going to choose my challenges instead of having my challenges choose me to wake me up to get into alignment.
Well, and I think too that there becomes it becomes a skill, right?
Yes.
In that,
yes.
When I feel the beginnings of fear, because it's become a practice, then it's like, okay, I'm recognizing this earlier. I'm not ignoring it. I'm not stuffing it in the closet. I'm going to name it. And then what am I going to do about it? So I don't think that you necessarily will get to that point. It's not to say it'll never happen, but it's less likely because you start to recognize those things earlier.
Yes. I love that you said that. That's so important, because I think people forget that they can train themselves for success. When we look at successful people in the world, it's because either they had that conditioning when they were young, or they trained themselves to be that way. And so I like to remind people, I tell people all the time, train your brain for success. It's just a habit. I was in the habit of beating myself up. I was in the habit of blaming everyone else. I was in the habit of, my first go-to would be doubt, fear, uncertainty, shame, guilt, just blame, right? Now my habit is, oh, what's the solution? What am I afraid of? How can I shift it fast? Oh, I feel off. Let's notice that. And so I just trained myself over time and it reshapes your brain. So the cool thing about neuroplasticity is that we used to think like, oh, you're set in your way of thinking and your way of being. No, not at all. You can dramatically change yourself over time, just taking strategic daily action, and your brain actually starts to develop the pattern of that being your first go-to response instead of the beat up, the fear, and the shame. Now it goes to like, oh, solution orientation. What's possible here? How could I think differently about this? What's one step I could take in the direction? Oh, I feel a little bit off today. What's going on? I'm going to meditate and journal instead of, drowning myself in misery and getting stuck in analysis paralysis and perfectionism and not doing anything about it. And so it's a practice and it's a journey.
Well, and I heard quite a few little, I'm not sure the way, the habit forming questions, right?
Yeah.
That you brought in there. And it's not unlike, and I'm going to go back to school. It's not unlike math, or it's not unlike language arts, where you're being taught to look for specific things so that you can get to the solution, so that you can get to whatever it is that you're working on. And that's the same kind of thing that we're doing, was we're being taught what specific things to look for. So I'm noticing this feeling. So then I name this feeling, and then and then what do I do with this feeling? What are my solutions? And it becomes like a checklist of questions that we can actually go through to get from point A to point B.
Totally. Yeah. It's something I wrote down as you were talking, because it's so true. The mindset of there's always a solution. is important. And when you know there's always a solution, you're going to ask questions to get there, instead of a fear mindset. Is a fear stuck victim mindset thinks there's never a solution. I'm always going to be stuck. This is always going to be my reality. I mean, how many times do you hear people say things like that? Like, I've always been this way, which indicates that the subtext of that is like, and I'll always be this way, And so we want to shift our thinking into like, there's always a solution. Let's shift our brain in the solution thinking and create the habit of doing that. And then you can always find an answer. When I very first started, one of my first strategies I help people do was I called it the ultimate mindset switch. And it was just the question, how can I? So I would ask myself that all the time. How can I? Ooh, how can I? What's possible here? And so it would open your mind up to thinking, instead of going like, I can't, it's not possible, I don't know. You just go, how can I? And then you start thinking of 10 ways. How can I do this? This. And then your brain starts to track for opportunities and answers, instead of staying stuck in, it's not possible, there's no way this can happen for me.
Awesome. And what I really like to end that off with is, much like school, sometimes the teacher is what makes a difference, because they're the ones that teach you the different questions to ask so that you can continue to move forward. So it is about finding that coach, that teacher that you connect with, that triggers those types of questions in yourself. So with that being said, I want to make sure that our listeners know how to connect with you. Can you share the best way to connect with you again?
Yes. I would say that everyone could start with my Money Blocks profile. That is by far the best way, where they're going to get the most information for themselves to understand what's holding me back in my business, in my life, unconscious blocks that we've been talking about. So if they go to moneyblocksprofile.com, so moneyblocksprofile.com, that's a great way. And then everything in my business is NFA Money. So if they use NFA Money for website and handles and all those things, social media connections, YouTube channel, my podcast is on that page. So everything is easy to find there.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Amanda. I loved the conversation. And what I really loved is the simplicity of the perspective. It doesn't have to be complicated to be able to move yourself from point A to point B.
Yes. It's so much easier than we think.
Awesome. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for coming and sharing your time with us today here at Heart-repreneur Radio and TV show. I want to remind you to head on over to Facebook and connect with us at Heart-repreneurs with Terri Levine. You'll be able to connect with more heart-based business owners like Terri, like myself, and you'll also find Dr. Amanda there as well. So I'm looking forward to connecting with you there. Please like, subscribe, and we always love those 5-star reviews. And we'll see you again next week.
You've been listening to Heart-repreneur Radio, maximizing your personal and business results by leading with your heart, with your host, Terri Levine. This show is produced every week for your enjoyment and education. To make sure you never miss a single show, add us to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe in iTunes. You can also read Terri's latest blog posts at www.heartrepreneur.com/blog, or follow Terri on Twitter at MentorTerri and on Facebook.com/Heart-repreneur Terri Levine. Your questions and comments are always welcome and appreciated. Send them to Terri on either Facebook or Twitter. Thank you for listening.